Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a list of some anticipated releases for 2020, specifically some anticipated sequels. Around the middle of the year, I did a similar thing where I made one video about some anticipated sequels and then a separate video about a bunch of books that were going to be the first books in series that I had kind of seen a little bit about on Goodreads, and I thought they sounded really interesting. I am going to do that again, but I'm going to start with the sequels I'm excited about. There's only a few, and then there's a couple that I haven't actually read the first ones of, but I'm planning to, so they're kind of like bonus anticipated releases. But I'm going to start with one that I feel like a lot of you are excited about, I'm excited about, I feel like a lot of you know I'm excited about it, and that would be Rhythm of War, the fourth book now in the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. I remember when he posted this a few days ago that it said it was coming out in November of this upcoming year, and it said something like coming soon, and some people were saying, oh, November, that's not exactly soon. And I thought, it's probably 1,000-page plus books. It's still pretty soon. I just am surprised because Sanderson, for a while, I feel like he was not exactly sure. He didn't want to get our hopes up, and he was very nicely being like, I'm aiming for 2020, but we'll see. So to have a concrete release date, we know it's coming out in 2020, is so exciting. Without giving away spoilers, I would love to know which of the Stormlight Archive books has been your favorite. For me, Oathbringer, the third one, was actually my least favorite in the series so far. It is going to be a total of 10 books, but broken up into two 5-part arcs. And for me, that third book felt like it is a middle book because I feel like it had to tie some things together from the first two, but also it had to lead into the next one's little. I could be completely wrong. We'll find out when the fourth one comes out, but there are so many things about that third one that I have kind of mixed feelings about because I don't know where it's going to go. I have a lot of trust in Sanderson because I love so many of his books, and that third one, I'm sure a lot of what he did is in preparation for the others, so I think it's going to have a good payoff, and it just had to do what it had to do in certain situations. But I'm so excited for it, and if all of you who have read Stormlight Archive would like a recap of those first three before Rhythm of War comes out, I did do a Stormlight Archive recap video a little while back, and sorry to toot my own horn here, but it's one of my favorite videos because it's not what you would expect. Even if you don't need a recap, I think you would like that video. Switching now to something else, I am very excited for Night of the Dragon. This is a book by Julie Kagawa. It is the third book in her Shadow of the Fox series, which is a Japanese-inspired fantasy that follows two main characters. One is a very mischievous but innocent and somewhat naive girl named Yumeko who has some cool fox powers, and then we also follow a character who's kind of this brooding samurai type, and these two end up on a journey together. They are kind of total opposites, but the relationship between them is really entertaining, and I really enjoyed the first one. It's definitely a traveling story, and so it feels somewhat episodic, which I personally really liked about the first one. The second one did not feel episodic whatsoever to me, and it had a different tone overall. And similar to how Oathbringer felt a little bit like a middle book, this one, literally, it is a middle book because it's a trilogy and it's the second one. It had some things about it that I think were necessary for the overall arc, or at least I'm hoping it was, and that I'm going to love the payoff in the end. But I didn't love that shift. It just wasn't quite the same as the first one, and without giving away spoilers, it's just that there's something about the first one I liked that wasn't there in the second one that I think is going to be back in the third one. So I'm really excited to see how this all comes together. If this third one is good, it has so much potential to be a new favorite trilogy for me. Next up, we have another conclusion to a trilogy. That would be The Ember Queen, and this is a story that follows in the first one, Ash Princess, a girl whose kingdom was conquered, and she was kept. She was the former heir to the kingdom, and she was kept solely so that if her kingdom tried to rebel against their conquerors, they would publicly beat her. Anytime there's any kind of an uprising starting, she has to be whipped and things like that. Just really, she's had a horrific, awful life, and she's kind of a shell of her former self. And something happens where she finds this spark to try to be more for her people and to be more for herself. The first one definitely was quite tropey. There's definitely a love triangle in that story, which I know is not a favorite for a lot of people. But I ultimately didn't actually hate the execution of it. I found it extremely entertaining, which sounds very morbid after I described the plot, but it's not quite as dark as perhaps the plot makes it seem like it would be. I enjoyed that first one quite a bit though. When I read it very quickly. And the second one I enjoyed. There was definitely a bit of a transition when it came to the threats, and it will be very interesting to see how the new threats that kind of came about end up playing a role in this third one. I'm really excited to see this conclusion. I don't know that it will ever grip me emotionally, perhaps the way some of my other series have, but it's one of those that while it's got some tropes that some people don't really like, and I don't know that I even always like some of the tropes that are in it, it really is very entertaining and definitely quick reads, and I find them to be good for in between, perhaps more serious other books that I sometimes pick up. I'm going to get into my two maybe I'm excited about these books because I'm fairly certain I'm at least going to enjoy one of these. So the King of Scars book, which is the first book in the Nikolai duology by Leigh Bardugo, is one that I've heard somewhat mixed things about, but ultimately fairly pretty positive. And I enjoyed Grisha Trilogy. I'm wanting to reread it to see what I think of it now, but I enjoyed it well enough. It is something a lot of people do not care for, but I found that I think that series is one that is really good for if somebody is just getting into young adult fantasy and perhaps they're on the younger end of the young adult age range, but as an adult and as for a lot of us hearing hype about it going into that trilogy, it sometimes feels cliche. And I completely understand that. I understand why people don't love it. I know the main character has special snowflake syndrome and that she can be kind of annoying, but I remember finding the trilogy entertaining enough, and then I really enjoyed Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, so I'm very curious to see what my thoughts are going to be about King of Scars. I've heard it leans more toward the tone of the Grisha trilogy, but you do kind of want to read all of those previous books before King of Scars, so I plan to read King of Scars. The next maybe I'm excited anticipated release, the kind of bonus one, would be another book that is in the same world as the Queens of Innisleer. This is a story that my friend Jade and I actually are both interested in reading. We are probably going to try to get to it at the beginning of 2020. I'll link Jade's channel down below. She's great. But it's a story that is a Shakespeare retelling. And from what I understand, this one is the Queens of Innisleer. It's a standalone. This next one that's coming out is also a Shakespeare retelling, but it's supposed to take place in the same world as Queens of Innisleer, just at a different time period. And so you can kind of consider them the same series, but they're not necessarily quite the same series. But either way, I'm very curious about Queens of Innisleer. It doesn't have the highest rating on Goodreads, but sometimes I completely disagree with the Goodreads ratings for books. So I'm still very much wanting to get around to this, and I'm very curious to see if I end up wanting to read that next one too. Switching back now to I'm definitely excited about these. The next one would be Heart of Flames by Nikki Powell-Preto. The first one is Crown of Feathers, and this is a story that has a little bit of a Mulan flair to it in that our main character at one point has to disguise herself as a boy in order to join this group of people that she is hoping eventually will be trained to fight against this particular group and to try and get some power reclaimed. I'm very much looking forward to the sequel. There are animal companions in the form primarily of phoenixes, which is really cool, and the bond that you see characters have with their phoenixes is one that is very touching. I really like how it's done. It's not quite like, the phoenixes are people. They're not quite like that, because there's a lot of animal companions where the animals talk and they communicate like people would. It's not really like that. They're basically animals, these mythological creatures, but I really like the relationship between the riders and the phoenixes. I think this is a great story for if you enjoy lore, because Nikki Powell-Preto has incorporated so much history into it, and the history kind of plays a little bit of a role. It's a little bit of a mystery how certain things went down. There's some big reveals, and I'm really excited to see how Heart of Flames is going to continue the story. Last on this list would be Blood and Honey. I believe this is just going to be duology, so I think the sequel is the last book in this story. And the first one Serpent and Dove follows these two characters who, one is a witch and the other is a witch hunter, and through some very unusual circumstances, they end up married, but the witch hunter does not know that she is a witch. She definitely knows he's a witch hunter though, so she is constantly kind of in fear, but also she has a very resistant personality. She's not one to just cower and sit back and let things be. So the story definitely has a will they, won't they, is there going to be a hate to love, or is it going to be hate and then discovery and still hate and now she's in danger. The first one had a lot of things that definitely made it a page turner, but I didn't ultimately love everything about that first one, but I am very curious to see what I think of the sequel. I think it has potential to be a really fun conclusion, but we'll see. I don't know. It's not necessarily what I'm usually looking for because it's kind of, you know, I would say halfway plot and halfway romance. I usually don't lean toward books that are that much romantically driven, but this one, we'll see. It could be an exception. It's not necessarily what I usually gravitate toward, but I'm excited nonetheless. I'm sure as 2020 goes along, there will be other releases announced that I'm excited about, or I'm probably missing a few, but let me know what your anticipated sequels are for this next year. I can't wait to do the video where I'm going to let you guys know about some that I've seen that I think sound great, but they're not sequels, they're first in series, and there's a lot that I've seen that look really cool, and I'm excited to talk about it. If you've got any of your own, feel free to leave those as well. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later.